and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say.
And welcome back to The Price of Business. Bill Knapik sitting in for Kevin Price. And now we have a great individual. He is Joseph Ahmad. He is known as a super lawyer. He's a lawyer for executives, one of the best lawyers in his field, and a 2015 Lawyer of the Year, and he has been named to the Texas Super Lawyer since 2003. Joseph, thank you and welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Very nice to have you. In the world of attorneys, it's great to have a super lawyer right here in the studio.
Well, there's a few of them, and I'll tell you, I try not to read my own press clippings, at least not too much. But being a super lawyer is quite an honor.
Very nice. And in the fourth largest city. Well, Joseph, tell people about your practice of law and your firm.
Well, the firm generally does civil litigation in state and federal cases, courts all over the country. What that really means is all litigation except for that's family law, no divorces, and no criminal. But everything else we handle all over the country, and sometimes even all over the world. Some of the intellectual property cases will take us all over the world. In my practice, I've traditionally focused on the employment area, particularly with executives. So I do a lot of executive severance, breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, and now more and more trade secret and covenant not to compete litigation as well.
Well, that's very interesting stuff and fascinating.
It is. It's exciting. It's exciting to come to work every day because it's always something new and it's always something interesting.
And as you're talking about serving executives, as far as even contracts before they sign up with a company, you help them with that as well?
Well, absolutely, if I can. I mean, some people kind of treat us like the doctor. They don't want to come to us unless they absolutely have to. Ideally, you want them to come in, as I say, early and often, kind of like voting in Chicago.
Yeah, that's what they do there.
Yeah, but, it doesn't always happen. But that's the ideal because then we can kind of craft a contract in the executive's best interest, as opposed to deal with it after the fact. That's always ideal.
The whole idea of prevention. Well, let's talk about that just for a second. As far as a contract for an executive, what are some of the components of that contract, and what should that executive consider, let's say, before they consult with an attorney?
Well, number one, obviously looking at the total compensation package and the conditions of that compensation. A lot of people get fooled by what's on the paper. They'll see a lot of numbers on a paper, but they don't pay attention to under what conditions they get it. And for example, you can promise $1 million, $10 million bonus. You can promise, all kinds of stock options, equity, restricted stock units, whatever. But if the condition attached to that is, well, it's in our discretion, it's in the board's discretion, then it's not as clear as you might think it is. In fact, you may not get it at all, and you have no control over whether you'll get it. And so you need to define the conditions very carefully and understand those conditions. Ideally, you'd want it attached to, if you perform certain criteria, if you're not terminated for cause, for example, and define what cause is, then you know that you'll get it. The second thing you want to be concerned about is what kind of restrictions you have on yourself after you leave. Nobody likes to think about, it's kind of like a prenup. Nobody likes to think about what happens if you leave because you're entering into this new relationship.
It's going to be great forever.
It's going to be great. You don't need to worry about what's going to happen afterwards because there will be no afterwards. Well, there will be. In today's world, executives last, at best, on average 5 to 7 years. So you better plan for what happens next. And you better not, unless you fully willing to accept it, you better not put yourself in a hole in terms of the restrictions post-employment.
That's very what you said there. What happens next? We have to always in life be thinking about what happens next. And here we're talking about the legal components of that, the conditions, and as you were talking about conditions, the word "if" comes up. Yeah, we'll do this if. So a lot of times, and that "if" is such a small word, sometimes they might not see that in the contract.
Well, people are optimists. What I've learned, especially executives, they have a lot of confidence, and they believe they're going to do it. And so they don't pay attention to the if. They see it as it's going to happen. But what they find out, unfortunately, a lot of times after the fact, is the company doesn't take that view, and they don't get it. And there is a extreme disappointment, and hence that's when they come to see me. Hopefully they've come to see me in the beginning, but a lot of times it's not until that moment of disappointment.
Well, and that's what I was just going to bring up. That the word that comes to mind is repair. So when they do have trouble, and then they come to you, and then you have to repair really a legal contract that's already been signed, right? So what is the mindset of in your position? What is the mindset that you go about to repair and to bring the person back and to help them?
Well, number one, ideally they come as soon as possible. And some people will come in before it's become, unsolvable. They come in during the process. They get the feeling that things are going south, and we immediately give them advice in terms of what they can do to kind of, bring it in an area where we can repair it. The second thing you always try to do, and I say this as somebody who has lived in the courtroom for 20 years, and I love being in the courtroom, but being in the courtroom is not necessarily in the client's interest. In fact, it's rarely in the client's interest unless they have no choice. So we try to work things out and try to engage in a dialogue, whether we do it directly as the attorney or whether we have the executive do it and kind of coach them along the way. But usually there has to be a dialogue with the company about trying to make sure that certain things are taken care of so that the executive is taken care of. And that's where we start, at least.
So avoid the courtroom.
Generally speaking, yes. And again, I say that as a litigator and somebody that loves the courtroom. And I think you have to love the courtroom in the sense of it always has to be an option you're willing to go through, but it really should be your last option.
Now, Joseph, we've talked about you being a super lawyer. Obviously, you enjoy what you do. You get excited about both in and out of the courtroom serving your clients. But give us an idea. In your profession, I think there's a mystique to it. People even joke about it sometimes. But what is it that drew you in to be an attorney and in this particular field? What do you love about it?
Well, I was drawn in sort of under false circumstances in the sense that I grew up watching, Perry Mason, later Ironside.
I was just thinking about TV.
It's TV, and you didn't know anybody. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I grew up in a little town in East Tennessee. And I barely even knew anybody whose parent was a lawyer. So I didn't really know. I watched these shows on television. I thought, this is exciting. They solved, these huge murder cases. And then the guy admits they did it on the stand based on what the lawyer did. So I was just drawn in. That's what drew me in. Now, the real practice of law is a little bit different than that. And then later there was L.A., law where the client comes in one day and by afternoon you've tried the case. Well, that doesn't happen either. But that's what drew me in, and there's still that excitement. It just doesn't happen as fast as it does on TV.
Well, that's fascinating because I watch those same TV shows and more, and that the lawyer is portrayed, and it really, in a way, it's an advertisement for someone that wants to make a difference, that wants to see the good guy win, right? The lawyers are portrayed in that way as heroic, and indeed they are often and even every day. But it's not exactly like that.
Not exactly, no.
Well, now I have to ask you, your favorite TV lawyer, or which the first one that comes to mind that you like?
Well, I still like, and gosh, what was his name? The guy that did, who was Perry Mason, is it?
Raymond Burr.
Raymond Burr,
there you go.
I always thought his demeanor as a lawyer, and I particularly liked his demeanor even when he was Ironsides and he was in a wheelchair, because he commanded so much, power and dignity, even after, he was Ironsides in a wheelchair. He had no loss of authority when he was speaking from a wheelchair, and it was impressive. He had command of the courtroom. That's something that as a litigator we always strive for. Get command and control of the courtroom. Be the voice of authority in the courtroom. He had that,
Well, you just brought up something that's so important no matter what we do, and I want to get into that about going into the courtroom, but just generally speaking, two aspects. Number one, mindset is so important in everything we do, and when you're dealing with people's lives, important things, huge dollar amounts, what is your mindset when you want to serve someone before you get into the courtroom to make sure you're doing it right? And then number two, when you get into the courtroom, if it gets to that, how do you have that mindset to have that command and to go forth?
Well, I really think it's the same for both. I mean, I think you have to you have to bleed confidence and trust. I mean, when a client meets you, it's all about trust. Will this person take care of me? Does this person have my best interests at heart? Will this person be an advocate for me? And the same thing when you go up in front of a court and you go up in front of a jury. When this person speaks in the courtroom, is this person authoritative? Do they speak with credibility? Do I trust what they say? It has been said many times, that personal credibility in the courtroom is paramount. And, like I said, going back to Perry Mason, when he spoke, people listened. That's what you want to have, not just with the client, but in the courtroom as well.
Very nice. Tell people, Joseph, how they can reach you.
Well, our website, azalaw.com, is probably the easiest way. You get on the website. We have all our email addresses. You have my phone number on there. I'm accessible by phone and by email. In this business, we're kind of operating 24/7, checking email rather constantly, and checking our phone as well.
And also I want to encourage people, too. They can Google your name, Joseph Ahmad, Ahmad, and then a lot of stuff comes up, and a lot of it has to say super lawyer right there.
I actually haven't Googled myself, but apparently I should.
Well, I did this morning, and that's what came up in the meantime. Once again, Joseph, the website?
azalaw.com.
Very nice, ladies and gentlemen. Joseph Ahmad, we are on The Price of Business. Bill Knapik sitting in for Kevin Price. We want to remind you the content that you hear goes over there to usdailyreview.com or thepriceofbusiness.com. And I'm Bill Knapik. Thank you for listening to The Price of Business, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for listening.